Hey guys, my name is Flora and this is my third year at the Ohio State. I'm currently double majoring in communication and English. I'm also an international student from Beijing, China, so this is my 7th year studying in the US now. So yeah, let's begin with my presentation today. So my topic for this presentation is violence and aggression. I'm going to start off by the definition of aggression first. So aggression is a behavior of being motivated to harm others, while violence is a subtype of aggression that involves the physical behavior of killing or injuring others intentionally. So not only relating to video games, violence and aggression also relate to many other areas in the society, like it relates to the psychology area, and also the crimes that happens in our real life also has a great relation to this topic. My core argument for this presentation is it is found that people could mimic and adopt behaviors by learning and observing others. This idea of social learning theory has been applied to both games and society a lot, since there is a close relationship between the violence in video games and aggression among the gamers. The more people are exposed to violent video games, the more likely they will perform aggressive behaviors and have negative influences. Both the content and the effect of video games are important because they are potential factors that cause people to have violent behaviors. Such violent game contents are closely related to aggression in society, and to avoid increasing any risky behaviors, people need to be aware of the potential dangers and negative effects that violent video games could bring to them. So for this presentation, I decided to talk about social learning theory in particular. So it is the idea that people will learn and imitate certain behaviors through observation. It points out the importance of environmental and cognitive factors to learning and behavior. So from the study, there are actually 3 contents of games that relate to the idea of social learning theory a lot. First, it will be demographics of violent characters. It is the perpetrator type, age, sex, ethnicity, and likability. So the types of characters that are most common in violent video games are human, adult, male, white, and neutral. The second content is justification. It is the idea that different types of perpetrator can make their violent actions appear to be more just to gamers. So the result actually shows that Asian and teenagers, their actions tend to be more just than other characters in the games. The third content is graphicness. It is the level of graphic contents or graphic violence. So the study result shows that Asian and male characters have the highest level of graphic contents. So how does it relate to social learning theory? So it is likely that game players may behave similarly as the violent perpetrators that they find demographically similar to themselves, which relates to the idea of learning of aggressive attitudes and behaviors. These violent perpetrators may be considered as their behavior models. So when gamers are playing violent video games, when they see game characters that are pretty similar to themselves, they tend to have the similar violent actions. So for example, if I'm playing a violent video games and I see a female Asian game characters in that game, and I just tend to have the similar actions as that character is having. For example, if I see that Asian character is fighting or shooting someone, and it's very likely for me to behave the same way because I see that Asian character as my behavior models. So here there are some effects of games that actually relate to the idea of social learning theory. First, from the study, they actually have 3 conditions: guns, swords, and a non-violent control condition. And the effects are touch the handgun, time spent holding a handgun, and trigger pulls. So the result shows that the gun violent condition actually has the greatest effects overall. So how does it relate to social learning theory? So playing a violent video game, especially the exposure to gun violence, can increase the possibilities of children touching a real handgun, the time they spend holding the handgun, and the number of trigger pulls. There are also long-term effects of exposure to media violence on children who always expose themselves to violent video games, and they are, more likely to have violent behaviors like shooting at themselves or their partners. So when gamers are playing like this type of violent video games, especially for children, they tend to have these similar actions because they can't just distinguish the difference between the game world and the real world. Like if they may think, oh, okay, if I can shoot in the games, then why not, like why can't I just shoot in real life? So yeah. So my conclusion is, people tend to learn and mimic behaviors through observation, which explains the positive association between violent video games and aggression. Since games have different types of contents, people usually discover a similarity between the game characters and themselves, which will lead them to adopt similar behavior as the game characters, even some dangerous behaviors. People will be likely to have both short-term and long-term effects when they have exposure to violent video games. It is necessary for people to pay more attention to the content of the games that they are playing and the effects that these games will bring to them in real life, so that people can reduce the chance of increasing violent behaviors in society. For general public, since violent video games can be really popular among people, I believe people should realize the negative outcomes and the result of this exposure to violent video games and the idea behind social learning theory, which is how people can mimic behaviors through observation. Especially when playing violent games, people can also mimic those dangerous behaviors and apply them to real life. Parents also need to ensure that their children have firearm safety courses to reduce dangerous and violent behaviors, especially for handguns. So, people usually think, games are something like not that serious, but in fact, violent games can actually lead to something more serious happening in real life, even some crimes in our life. So I believe it is really crucial for people to realize that there is actually a relationship between violent video games and our behaviors in real life. So for gamers, to decrease or avoid increasing the intention of having violent behaviors, gamers should be aware that whether watching or playing violent video games will have both short and long-term effects on all players. So it doesn't matter if you are a male or female player, violent video game will always have some influence on you. And gamers should also pay attention to the amount of time that they spend playing violent video games and distinguish the difference between games and real world. So it is important for the gamers to be able to tell the difference between whatever happens in the game world and the real world, because you can't bring all those violent behaviors or actions to real life, otherwise it will be considered as a crime or something. Yeah. And then for video game industry professionals, the professionals should take this issue seriously, since the exposure to violent video games may lead people to have some dangerous behaviors, and there are also many other risk factors like causing harm to people both physically and psychologically. The professionals may consider making game content less violent so that the game effect will be weaker. So when the video game industry professionals are creating this game, they should consider adding less violent content, so that the violent effect that game will have will be weaker. Also, when they're offering the game to people, they should also pay attention to the age group of players. They should have an age limit when they're offering people this type of game. Thank you for watching my presentation today, and here's my references page. And don't spend too much time playing violent video games, and remember to stay safe during the break. Thank you.